Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Long time no see. I know I've been off this channel for I don't even know how long, a couple of months. I appreciate those of you who have been patient with me. For those of you who have been checking in on me, it is greatly appreciated. I really have just been dealing with mental health issues, in all honesty. And for those of you who struggle with depression, I'm sure you can relate to this, where you just don't have the energy to be as productive as you would like to be. And then on top of that, it's like you get all of this anxiety because you're constantly thinking about the things that you're supposed to be doing, and then that anxiety drains your energy even more. It makes you even more tired. So it's just like that cycle of depression that I have been in. So whenever I can, muster up any energy, I take that energy and use it on Patreon, and I use it on my tarot channel. That's my full-time income, so I have to put the little bit of energy that I do have onto those platforms. I also did write a post about this in the community section of my channel. I'm sure that some of you guys probably saw that post, but yeah, I wrote a post about the fact that I read tarot full-time and I'm on Patreon, and I got a lot of comments saying like, wait a minute, you read tarot? Like, a lot of you didn't know that I'm a full-time tarot reader, which I thought was weird because I've been reading tarot since 2018. But I guess I never really talk about it on this channel. So yeah, I am a full-time tarot reader for those of you who don't know. And my tarot readings are always open. So, well, not always, but they're open at least once a month. I try to restock my readings. So if you wanted to book a tarot reading with me, I will leave the link to that in the description box. And yeah, I just thought it was weird that some of you didn't know that that's my full-time job. But yeah, as you can see by the title of this video, we're going to be talking about my 20s and reflecting on my 20s, because today is my 30th birthday. Well, by the time this video goes up, it'll probably be the day after my birthday, because I'm filming this like kind of late at night. But my birthday is February 5th, and I turned 30 years old today, which is very, very weird to me. It feels odd. I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but when you deal with a lot of like trauma or a lot of depression and things like that, it's very hard to plan ahead. It's like a part of you, I don't know, this is like really morbid, but like I said, I'm sure some of you can relate. It's like a part of you doesn't really think that you're gonna make it to see certain ages. It's like this kind of dark cloud of like doom over you that makes you feel like that you're just not going to make it to certain milestones. So I am grateful and blessed to be here, but it does just feel very, very strange. But I wanted to reflect on my 20s and just give you guys some tips on the things that I've learned in my 20s, because I went through a lot in my 20s. So I figured I would give you, tips so that, you don't have to go through it, because I have already gone through it. So it's like best to learn from people who have already experienced it so that you don't have to. And even if you are past your 20s, I'm sure that some of these tips can still be helpful and useful to you. So let's go ahead and dive right into the tips. And if you see me looking down, it's because I wrote the tips in my notebook, because I don't want to forget anything. So let's start with number one. So number one, I wrote down: destructive coping mechanisms feel good at the moment, but can destroy you in the long run. So I definitely have experience with this a lot throughout my 20s. I was just in really, really bad situations, like really bad relationships, really traumatic relationships. And I did not cope well when things would end in the relationship, or when we were just in a really rough patch. I really did not have the correct way of coping. So my coping mechanisms were very self-destructive, and they felt good in the moment, but in the long run, they ended up pretty much destroying me. And I have a couple of examples. Like, for example, I had a coping mechanism of eating a lot of junk food, which some people might say that's not that terrible, but it actually is, because I have a chronic digestive issue. So I'm not supposed to be eating certain foods or certain junk foods, but that was the only way that I felt like I knew how to cope. And so then in the long run, it ended up making my symptoms worse, ended up making my digestive problems worse. So yeah, that's just an example of like a coping mechanism that, in the short term, it seemed like a good idea, but in the long run, it ended up hurting me even worse. Another example would be like when a relationship of mine would end, like if I would get discarded by a person that I was with. I would cope by jumping into a new relationship really quickly. Like that was my coping mechanism, which I wasn't fully conscious that I was doing this. I was just kind of on autopilot, like before you start your healing journey and you're just on autopilot and you're just doing whatever feels good at the moment to help you to cope. That's pretty much what I was doing. So I would jump into another relationship because I felt so abandoned, I felt so worthless, and I was extremely codependent. So I would cope by jumping into a new relationship, and that relationship would obviously end up being toxic too, and it would just make my mental health even worse, and it would lower my self-esteem even more. And so yeah, just try your best when you are going through hard times to find healthy coping mechanisms that won't ruin you even more in the long run. And it's best to get to the root of the problem if you can. Like, get to the root of the problem and heal it so that you won't have to turn to any destructive coping mechanisms. Like, for example, instead of jumping into these new relationships, I could have instead tried to heal my codependency and got to the root of that, and I wouldn't have needed that coping mechanism of jumping into these new toxic relationships. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, any coping mechanisms that you have that are self-destructive in the long run, please try your best to get rid of them and try your best to get to the root of the issue and heal it at the root. Okay, number 2, choose a skill and master it. And this is something I really, really wish that I knew in my 20s. I spent so much time in my 20s just focused on relationships that I never really focused on, like, choosing a skill that I wanted to learn and, constantly pursuing it. I would start certain things, like I would start learning certain skills. Like when I was in my early 20s, I was really interested in graphic design. So I took like a graphic design class, but I never continued studying it. I never mastered it. First of all, it will teach you self-discipline for sure. When you are mastering a skill, it takes a lot of consistency. It takes a lot of focus. And if you do that over time, it does teach you how to remain self-disciplined, which is a skill that you are going to need throughout life anyway. So it's like a bonus pretty much. It's like you're mastering this skill, and on top of that, you're building the self-discipline that you can apply to other skills in your life that you might want to learn. And also, I will say that it can be very beneficial for you financially. You never know who is going to need the skill that you have mastered. And like I said, most people have not stuck to a certain skill and mastered it. So if you're someone who has mastered a skill, someone may need that skill and they may hire you for it and pay you for it because you are going to be someone who is rare. Like if no one else or if very few people have mastered this skill and you have, that means you have a rare talent or a rare skill that's very valuable, and then you can get paid financially or you can get compensated financially. Especially with the internet, you pretty much can monetize anything these days. So I would recommend mastering a skill for those reasons. Okay, number 3, operating in extremes will keep you imbalanced. And this is really, really important, especially if you want to maintain your peace of mind in your 20s. I definitely was someone who always operated in extremes. I was never in a middle balanced area, and I think that is a result of trauma. Of course, I wouldn't say that this was entirely my fault. My life has always been kind of chaotic and imbalanced, so naturally I just became a chaotic, imbalanced person who's always in one extreme or another. But I can really say that that really disrupted my peace. And towards my late 20s is when I really started to kind of see that and see how I needed to learn how to find balance. So for example, in my early 20s, I was operating in the extreme of being too open. I was too trusting of people, too willing to open my heart to people when I barely knew them, like creating fantasies of a person and then letting them in based off of a fantasy and not based off of reality. And so I was operating in that extreme, and then I would end up getting used, I would end up getting heartbroken and things of that sort. But then I shifted to the opposite extreme where I was too closed off. I closed my heart off. I became very paranoid. I became very pessimistic about people in general. And that didn't do me any good either, because that made me feel really lonely, made me feel really isolated. I wasn't getting used anymore or hurt anymore, but it was still just very, very lonely and depressing. And I would also sabotage connections because I was so paranoid and pessimistic and thinking that they were going to do something to hurt me. So I might as well sabotage it in advance. So that's just an example of how I was living in, extreme extremes, and I needed to find a healthy balance of knowing when to block, certain people out and knowing when it was safe to let certain people in. So if you find yourself operating in extremes in any way, just try your best to find balance, because that's how you will find peace. Okay, number 4. Get comfortable in the void. And I actually have a Patreon post about this. I'll leave the link to that in the description box if you want to check out that post. But yeah, get comfortable in the void. And when I say the void, I mean that space that you enter when you are in a very, very dark period of your life. And it's usually when you lose something or someone that was very valuable to you, that dark space that you immediately fall into. When I was in my 20s, I experienced this dark space a lot, and I would try to quickly get out of it. It's almost like I felt like there was something wrong with being in that space. It made me feel like I wanted to quickly get over whatever it was that I was going through. Like I wanted to quickly get out of it. And I was not grieving properly because of that. I was not reflecting on, what it is that I just lost, what it is that I was supposed to learn from that loss. So I was quickly trying to get out of that void. And like I said, I wasn't grieving properly. So I had a lot of, stored sadness within me that wasn't released because I didn't grieve properly. And also I would try to move on so quickly that I didn't learn the proper lessons, and I would end up repeating those lessons, repeating the same cycle and going through the same heartbreak and the same loss. So I would say that when you lose something or someone that's very valuable, give yourself time to be in that dark space. I'm not saying to drown in that dark space or let it like completely consume you, but give yourself time to be in that dark space, to grieve, to reflect, to get closer to yourself, to get closer to God, get closer to the people who actually love you and support you. Embrace that dark space instead of trying to quickly move past it, because there's nothing wrong with being in that space. Like I used to feel like, oh, it's a waste of time being in this space, but it's actually not. I learned a lot about myself while I was in that void. And a lot of the videos that I make on this channel actually was a result of me being in that void and actually reflecting. So yeah, like I said, I have a post about this more in depth on Patreon, and I will leave the link to that in the description box if you want to see it. But yeah, get comfortable in the void. Okay, sorry guys if my camera angle slightly changed. My camera overheated, so I had to wait for it to cool down. But back to the list. Number 5. Health is top priority. Okay, so this one is extremely important, especially because, as you guys know, I've mentioned in past videos that I have a chronic stomach illness. It is something that definitely hinders my life in a lot of ways. It hinders me from like traveling comfortably. Sometimes I have to take off work to have to go and get treatment at the hospital. So it's a lot. So I will say take this extremely seriously, especially coming from me, who is technically not in good health. Your health is everything, and you need to take it as seriously as you can. Do as much research as you can about your body. Even if you're not sick, even if you don't have a chronic illness, still learn as much as you can about your body, about your health, about your digestive system, about your nervous system. Just really invest your time and energy into learning about optimizing your health. Make sure that you are also keeping your stress down, because a large part of the reason why my chronic illness developed is because of stress. So health should be first on your priority list, first on your agenda. Health is very important. Okay, number 6, don't judge, or you will be put in the same position as the person that you have judged. Now, this is extremely important as well, because I've been through this so many times where I will judge a person harshly because I'm on the outside looking in, and I'll have so many opinions about the situation because I'm just a very opinionated person by nature. I am an Aquarius, so I'll have a bunch of opinions about like something I would observe, and then next thing you know, I would be in that person's shoes. And to me, it was just God's way, or the universe's way of showing me, do not judge a person, because it could always be you. And there have been situations where I never thought it would be me, and it ended up being me. So just be very careful of who you judge. Try your best to be as understanding and empathetic towards people as you can. Try to put yourself in their shoes, because if you don't, the universe will put you in their shoes and you will not have a choice but to see things from their perspective. So yeah, just try not to judge people. But I think also you know, coming from a place of compassion towards people and trying to put yourself in their shoes, I just feel like it's good for you as a person in general. It helps you to grow. It helps you to see things from different perspectives. It helps you mature as a person. So it's beneficial for you as well. Okay, so number 7, accept that you are an imperfect person and learn to forgive yourself. This is something that I definitely struggled with. I was someone who just had a very, very negative internal voice. So whenever I would mess up, I would just really beat myself down over that mistake that I made. It's like I took pride in being a good person. And so whenever I would mess up, it was like I would persecute myself and I would label myself as a bad person, and just, it would really, really get to me. It would really just eat me up inside. I would have a hard time forgiving myself to the point where I would start to really just self-destruct. I would experience extreme levels of self-hatred, and I had to really rewire my brain to understand that I am not a perfect person and that I don't need to be a perfect person in order to be a good person. You know, a good person is someone who tries their best to be a decent human being, and it does not mean being perfect all the time and never making mistakes. And that's something that I had to teach myself. I had to rewire my brain to think that way. And so now I'm much better at, you know, when I make a mistake, I'm much better at forgiving myself, telling myself that it's okay, you're not the only one that has made these mistakes, you're a human, and not feeling like a bad person every time I mess up. Especially when I started having really bad mental health problems around the age of like 25, 26, right around the age that I started this channel is when my mental health problems got really, really terrible. And so I was making a lot more mistakes than I was used to making. Like I said, it was really, really hard for me to adjust to that. It was really hard for me to practice self-compassion and self-forgiveness, and that was just making my mental health worse. So I had to retrain my brain to know that an imperfect person can still be a good person. Okay, so number 8. The discomfort of facing your fears is better than the regret of missed opportunity. Okay, I will say that this one is a major one for me. I mean, everyone on this list is, but especially this one still, there's a bit of a sore spot, because I had an experience in my 20s where I did miss out on an opportunity because of my fears, because of my fear of failure, because of my fear of not being good enough. I basically passed up an opportunity. Well, I actually kind of sabotaged an opportunity. And I took such a long time to get over it because I had so much regret. Basically, I ended up passing up this opportunity, and then someone else was granted this opportunity. And I pretty much just had to watch as this person got the opportunity that I missed out on. So this can apply to like different areas of your life. This could apply to career, which was the case for me, but it could also apply to, you know, certain relationships that you may have sabotaged, or certain ideas that you didn't act on because you were afraid of failing. It can apply to different areas of your life, but there's nothing like that feeling of knowing that it could have been you to have that certain job opportunity, to have that certain career, and you passed it up because you just really, really were afraid that you were not worthy of it, or that you weren't good enough for it. And you just see the next person like riding off into the sunset with your dream career, and it's so hurtful. Like, even thinking about it still, I'm like, ugh, I'm like shaking. But yeah, it's so hurtful, and you just spend a lot of time in regret. And I just wish that I would have taken that opportunity and faced that fear, because that discomfort that I would have felt in the opportunity, I'm sure would have been a million times better than that regret that I felt after passing it up. Okay, number 9. Invest your time into things that will give you a positive return. All right, this one is extremely important. Okay, all of these things are important. I feel like every number, I'm like, these are extremely important. This one's a big one. But yeah, all of these are important. But yeah, where you invest your time, very, very important, because your 20s will go by just like that. And next thing you know, you'll be looking back at what you've been doing this whole time, and you don't want to regret the way that you have spent your time. And not only that, but you know, what you spend your time doing on a daily basis, it really does determine your future, and it also determines your way of thinking. Like the way that you program your mind is through repetition. So what you do on a daily basis and what you invest your energy into on a daily basis, it's going to program your mind to think a certain way. So for me, I invested my time into relationships, unfortunately, because these relationships were very toxic. And when you're in toxic relationships on a daily basis over and over again, like you're experiencing the same cycles over and over again, it programs your mind. And basically these toxic relationships program my mind to make me believe that I was extremely worthless, that I was not lovable, and things of that sort. And these things happen gradually. You don't even realize how much, these things that you're investing your energy into are affecting you until one day you look back and you've been doing the same thing for 5 years and your mind is programmed in a negative way. You see what I'm saying? You have to be very intentional with what you invest your time into and make sure it's going to give you a positive return. So instead of investing in those toxic relationships and trying to get these toxic people to love you or accept you, trying to get them to change and fighting with them, trying to get them to see your worth, instead of investing your energy into that, invest your energy into self-love. Invest your energy into, healthy friendships. Invest your energy into your career path. Invest your energy into your health. You can also date as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with dating, lighthearted dating, and having fun. But I just think investing your time into these relationships that are going to ultimately destroy you in the end, it's not a good return on your investment. You see what I'm saying? So just be mindful of what you are investing your energy and your time into. And it doesn't even have to just apply to relationships. Like, don't invest your energy into like gossip and spending too much time on social media, just letting time pass as you're scrolling your days away, because that's not going to give you a positive return in the long run. You see what I'm saying? So take note of what you invest your energy into on a daily basis and ask yourself, in the long run, is this going to give me a positive return, or is this going to give me a negative return, or is this going to keep me stagnant? Also, invest in learning. Invest in learning as much as you can. Anything that your parents maybe didn't teach you, anything that you didn't learn in school, invest in learning about it. If you want to learn about fixing your credit, invest in maybe taking a course about that, or just looking up articles about it online, watching YouTube videos. Invest in financial literacy in general, taxes, things of that sort. Invest in learning about all of these things, because that's going to give you a positive return in the long run. You see what I'm saying? Be careful with your energy and where you are investing it. Okay, so number 10, you need a support system. And this is something that I did not realize until my mid-20s. And that's only because my mid-20s is when I started having really severe mental health issues due to the narcissist that I dated, that I started my channel about. That's when my mental health issues started being really, really bad. Before then, I struggled with depression, I struggled with anxiety, but I never felt like I needed a support system, or a support system really wasn't that dire to me. And on top of that, I do have a video on my channel about being the black sheep of the family. So for those of you who have been the black sheep of the family, I'm sure you can relate to that feeling of, I don't need anyone, I'm just going to be a loner, I don't need anyone, that type of energy. I had that energy for sure. Like, I had like that black sheep energy where I just didn't feel like I needed like a large support system or anyone to lean on for the most part. Like, I could just deal with it on my own. But when my mental health issues started getting really bad, that's when I really started seeing like, whoa, okay, I actually do need people, because this is when I started having like actual mental breakdowns, having to go to the mental hospital, being suicidal and things of that sort. That's when I really, really started to need help. But then also, when I moved out and got my own apartment and I was paying bills on my own, that's when life really gets real. And that's when you really start to see like, damn, I do actually need help. Like on days where I need to work, but I don't have the energy to clean my house. Like, I just have energy to work. My sister will come and literally like help clean my house with me. She'll be my support system in that aspect. Like, things like that. It's like you don't realize you need that support system until you hit adulthood, and and or until you start having severe mental health issues where you need people. You want people around you who love you and who support you, who encourage you, and who can take some of that load off, who can take some of that weight off of your shoulders. And if you don't have a support system that's physically there, I would say find a support system at least online that you can go to, that will uplift you, that will relate to you, that will make you feel seen and heard and validated, because that's just as important as a physical support system. Like, people who are there for you physically to help you, they'll give you money, they'll, you know, help drive you around, things like that. That's important, but also the emotional aspect is important. Those are the 10 things that I would recommend for your 20s, 10 pieces of advice for your 20s. Even if you're not in your 20s, I feel like you could benefit from some of that advice. Thank you guys again for being so patient with me, for sticking it out with me on this channel. And I am looking forward to doing more content with you in the future. My Patreon channel link will be in the description box. My tarot channel will be in the description box if you want to book a reading with me. And I will see you guys in my next video.